this is the terrifying nature that people just don't want to do anything about it, because it's so it's so difficult to acknowledge. It's like the movie Don't Look Up, right? We're kind of stuck in this. So I have a two-part question. I have like, how, if you know, like, of an effective way to transmit the message to be heard without like discouraging everybody. And also, how can transition take place with the small farmers? Because sometimes when we talk about climate change and animal agriculture, the small farmers get offensive with that, and they feel like they're attacked. And us vegans are like just don't want anybody to have fun in life and everything. So I was wondering if you have any tips on this, and how us as individuals can actually do a change. And also, have you signed the plant-based treaty? Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, Dominique, thank you so much for the questions. And I want to start by saying, first of all, that one of the primary messages which will help answer those questions, one of the primary thoughts or message within my presentation today, and as well as on Tuesday, is that first and foremost is that climate change is not the entire problem. And knowing that, you need to know that first. And this opens up the dialogue quite a bit better to say, for instance, small farmers and also so I think the first way to answer that is go over the first question, which is the effective way to get the message out. And I think and I do want to point out also that a summary of all viable solutions across all possible means will be given at the end of my second presentation on Tuesday. So I hope you tune in for that. We go over exactly where dollars are going to be coming from in terms of solutions. And so first of all, about that first question, yeah, I think the most effective way is to continue joining events like this. I think this is key, because we can't just influence policymakers if they're not aware. So the first step is to become aware yourself, spread the word, encourage others to become aware. And again, I wouldn't focus only on climate change. I mean, I would focus on all these aspects of global depletion that we're talking about, and then do what you can with your vote, of course. And we all know our votes don't count in some cases because of certain policy makers are in positions that we feel they shouldn't be in for the environment. But that's the first step, is to create an effective way to get the message out, is through events like this, through spreading the word with books. To also the other way is to and I'll combine answering both that about small family farmer, is to there's quite a bit of dollars being spent right now, 770 billion to be exact, and worldwide global subsidies. And there's a way that we can redirect subsidies into reforestation projects, saving mangroves, having small family farmers be incentivized for actually creating, planting, and using plant-based systems rather than animal-based systems. And if you educate them and you provide incentives, I haven't talked to any smallholder farmer that wouldn't be willing to do that. It takes a bit to go against cultural, green that they have been established in their culture and ideologies over the years. But most of these small family farmers want to stay alive, and they want to protect their children and their children's children. So it comes from education first, and then it comes from also redirecting policymakers and then where funds are going. And that can all be done. It can all be done. And then instead of terrifying, you use that word a couple of times, and I agree. It should be terrifying because we're on timelines. But I think that to be terrified should coexist with knowing that there is still hope, by doing the things that we're suggesting.
Thanks very much for that, Dr. Oppenlander. Up next, we have David. David, welcome.
Thank you. Am I the David you're speaking about?
Yes, we've got you, David. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Oppenlander, great lecture. A lot of numbers. I'm a numbers guy, so
good.
It appeals to me. I think a lot of people aren't numbers people, and it can be overwhelming. However, I'm wondering, I think there have been books written in the past about the real cost of, for instance, meat and animal products to society, the real financial cost. And I'm wondering, it seems to me, everything always comes down to money. And there must be a way that people can be educated enough and to recognize the real cost of these things to society, the financial cost. And is there any way that somehow that can be measured? And then if a government understands this, they can incentivize or tax to the point of influencing social behavior to the real cost of these things. You know, if a pound of beef, the cost to society is $50, that's going to discourage consumption. And it seems to me that that may be our only answer at this point.
Yeah. So David, first of all, terrific. First of all, thank you for tuning in on all this, and thank you for the question. It's that's at the heart, really, of a number of solutions that we propose, and most of this is, again, I'm going to be talking about on Tuesday. So that's good. This is kind of a prelude to that. But let me start by saying that I do combine numbers. This numbers can be overwhelming, but you know, when I'm presenting this, I always try to point out the reality of just the generalization that this is happening, and then I place numbers to support that. So I think the numbers are important. I mean, too. So that aside, I appreciate your appreciation for numbers, but also just the stark reality of the generalization of these areas of global depletion that we're confronted with. Next is that, yes, I have a brother that brings us up frequently that, states that, unless we're hit with money or something right in front of us, your child is being run over by a car, you're not going to necessarily get called to action. But there are studies and statistics that can place a value somewhat within a generalized amount to our health. It's very difficult to place it on our environment because you got to have these ancient aquifers that are irreplaceable. There's no money that can replace the water from the Ogallala, for instance. So, but you can certainly generalize and come up with some taxation of some sort, because you're exactly right. We need to educate first, but unless the general public is being, something hits their wallet, it seems like, which is unfortunate, they're not going to act. So, right, yeah, sure, it comes down to money, and there is a way to correlate this by just incentivizing farmers, small farmers, to or even larger farmers, to produce only plant-based foods, but then also the consumers. Yeah, there's got to be some way, and there's a way we can do that. It just has to be. We can't do it ourselves. It has to be funneled through policymakers too. So it seems difficult, but you hit on exactly what I think it's going to take. We're on timelines where it's going to take incentivizing and at the same time taxation. And I talk much more about this on Tuesday because I believe you can do both.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
It looks like we've got time for another question. Let's go to Joel. Joel, welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oppenlander. Absolutely remarkable presentation. I wish that everyone on the planet could hear it. And speaking of that, Ben, at some point, it would be great if you could let us know, because the question has been raised, when could this presentation be made available to us? I'd love to take this to my community and my state legislature and others. Dr. Oppenlander, my question is this, and I have this thrown back at me frequently. Let's say that we could be very, very successful and we had this massive change in dietary patterns all around the world, and it literally collapsed. Let's not talk about the mechanism of taxation and stuff, but let's say it literally collapsed animal agriculture. The business ends. And obviously that's not going to happen in one day. It's going to be over some period of time. What is the most humane program you can recommend for what happens to the animals currently in the pipeline? In other words, we can stop breeding programs so that we don't produce more. But what happens to animals currently existing? What's the best we can do on their behalf?
Well, Joel, a couple quick things. First of all, thank you so much for the kind words and thank you for the questions. Ben, I'd like to answer. This is very important. I think that first part of it actually was more of a statement, well, and a question to you, Ben. But I think the first part of that's very important. You know, I spoke a few years ago to the European Parliament, and I've spoken to a number of policymakers, but that was probably the most in collective in one, meeting, and nothing really came out of it. And it's really discouraging for me. But I think that's the key, is to take a presentation like this, which sums things up greatly, not just about climate change, but you need a comprehensive view for every policymaker everywhere in the world, and let them understand that's I think the education for them is first, and then having understanding really a basis for which they can then make some policies changes. So that's a very good point. I think that certainly a distillation of this, of this and my presentation on Tuesday is the start, not just thinking the policymakers are going to get around to it, but actually taking it to them and making sure they watch this. And then secondly, that question about what do we do with the current animals, that seems to pop up almost at all when I was lecturing, extensively, over the last decade. That comes up frequently. So my thought is this: with the reforestation and the rewilding and all the solutions that I'm going to be talking about on Tuesday as well, I'm calling for immediate elimination. We don't really have time to phase it in, as I mentioned, and I pretty much dwelled on that eat less meat issue. But it would still take about 5 to 10 years for any type of rewilding to take place correctly, or reforesting, or reestablishing mangroves, even some policies for incentivizing taxation. I feel like it would still take about 5 to 10 years. And most of these animals, I am not advocating at all, by any means, slaughtering any of them. So most of them would be phased out, and they're not all born today. They're not all, and most of these, unfortunately, domesticated animals, the ones that have been bred for domestication, or animal husbandry, they typically have and I don't know how much experience you've had, Joel, with these, but most of them have between, turkeys may, they typically have a heart attack if you go out and try to, pet them on the head. They're bred, so they're, and they don't live that long. So they're typically, we've seen on our rescue and sanctuary that most of these animals that are bred for slaughtering, live between 2 years to 12 years. I mean, on their own, on their 10 to 12 years. And so that actually, sort of coincidentally, sort of coincides, favorably with a 5 to 10 year projection of when all these forests could be rewilded and rejuvenated. And so I think it's a 5 to 10 year project, but we need to find some way to stop, with incentivizing and taxation, stop all of, eliminate meat and dairy and the production of that today. But then it would take about 5 to 10 years, and they would gradually be, sort of passing on their own.